Good morning, guys. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm talking to you guys today about something that isn't live yet, which is actually something that doesn't usually happen surrounding Decred. We like to deliver things and then start talking about it. The Decred Dex is actually not something that you can use today. It's a planned proposal for our recently released Politeia proposal system. So the community will have a chance to really dive into what this is going to entail and see if this is something they think is going to help benefit the project and benefit the space and something that they feel is worth the funding. So, my name's Scott Christian. I'm actually a contractor with the project, but I help with the social media marketing front and with events. You'll notice that's not a very technical role, so I'm not going to really dive into anything today that's too technical. I'm really going to try and just give you a brief overview of some of the properties of this proposal and really try and impress why you guys should be excited about this, because it's really huge. Even if you weren't really interested in the Decred project at all, this is huge for everyone that operates in this space. So I want to say that what is this, why, and why now? Basically, so like I touched on, this is a planned proposal for Politeia, and the proposal really aligns with our values with the Decred project. Sorry, just a moment. There we go. Basically, why this is being launched now is because, or it's going to be launched soon as a proposal to be discussed, is because we've had the recent release of Politeia, so the community can really chime in and try to lead the direction of where this is going to go. But right now, we're operating in a space where, with Bitcoin, we're founded on the idea of decentralization as something that should be, sought after, and to disintermediate centralization. So with Decentralized Exchange, there's not going to be a single server that can go down and no one can access and their funds or trade anymore. You're going to be able to trade with whatever other project that has built-in support on this exchange, and any project can come to us and create the support themselves and be supported on the exchange. So the time's always right for disintermediation of centralization in the cryptocurrency space. So currently, what's the status quo? I'm not a huge trader, but I have had some terrible experiences with centralized exchanges. By a show of hands, how many of you have tried to withdraw from an exchange and had, like, if only a brief moment of concern that maybe you weren't going to actually receive those funds? Yeah, that's a lot of hands, and it's not a good feeling. It really, it can just be a terrible user experience. So that's something you get with centralized exchanges currently, and you never know when that exchange is going to get hacked and you're going to lose all those funds entirely. There's also Know Your Customer and AML. It's something that's imposed upon them by the government, but it's sort of an intrusion of privacy. So if there's a way that we could not have that, that would be great. If the exchange has your funds, they have the opportunity to freeze them for whatever reason. And if that's something that could be avoided, that would also be nice. It's also another worry you have whenever your funds aren't under your own control. So centralized exchanges also have vulnerabilities to high-frequency trading, which is something that we see in the stock market, and it gives people with the resources to have an advantage over other traders. It's not something that we see as very fair for everyone that participates in trading. So it's something that we also feel is not great with centralized exchanges and status quo today. You've also got your trading fees. Withdrawal fees can be ridiculous. And the biggest one, as Decred has experienced personally, has been gatekeeping. It's up to the centralized exchanges to decide if your project is worthy of being listed, and that's usually after a cost-benefit analysis of is this cryptocurrency actually going to be traded with frequently and generate a lot of trading fees for us. If it's not, then it's never going to get listed, and there can be a variety of reasons that strategically they may choose to hold back listing your project. So what's our motivation for the decentralized exchange? And you'll notice this is actually a duplicate of the last slide. It's because the status quo with centralized exchanges is just, it's terrible. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of options. What we want to do with this proposal is give everyone these options. This isn't just for Decred, this is for the entire space. Anybody's project can come to us, they can develop the atomic swap code for their project and any other project's blockchain, and they'll be supported on the DEX. So this proposal was actually detailed in a blog post at blog.decred.org. You can go into all the fine, more technical details of it. This is a quote from Jake from that post. Jake believes that the proposed DEX will substantially improve the resiliency of the cryptocurrency ecosystem as a whole and Decred markets more specifically. So what he's saying there is really that a rising tide will raise all ships. But he's also tagging on at the end there that like Decred should help fund this because it's really going to bring a lot of publicity and attention to Decred and increase the value of our network just by ways of putting this out there as like goodwill to the cryptocurrency space. And since we have a lot of experience with the atomic swap code, we're likely going to have the most trading pairs at launch. But that doesn't mean that that will always be the case. It's really up to projects to come in and develop the code for the various atomic swaps between different projects that they would like to be able to facilitate transactions between. So now, the way I structured this presentation, this probably should have been a little closer to the beginning, but what is the Decred DEX? And it's laid out in the post, but this is basically going to be like a client-server architecture in a way that is decentralized so that the custody of funds always stays with you. You're never giving away the custody of your funds to a server that we'd be back in the same situation as with centralized exchanges. It could be frozen, it could be lost. Transactions are going to be facilitated via on-chain transactions. For smaller orders and order matching, there can be a off-chain Lightning Network backed network for smaller transactions. If there's any concern that on-chain trading fees or on-chain transaction fees might disincentivize trading, we will have that related off-chain Lightning Network facilitating smaller transactions. So you'll have a client, and that will probably be built into Decrediton, which is our GUI wallet, and that will connect to a server. And when you broadcast a transaction, it will be broadcasted to that server and then broadcasted to the network of servers from that server to reach everyone who's a part of the network. So, if you're really interested in more of the properties of this decentralized exchange proposal, you've really got to give this blog post a read. It's incredibly insightful and interesting, and it's really, I feel like people should be excited about this, and they really should think about maybe even getting involved in helping with the direction of it, because we really were trying to create something that everyone in the space will be happy with, and it will really just help us move away from having to worry about our funds getting hacked on an exchange and taking more responsibility for our funds. So you're probably wondering, aren't there already decentralized exchange projects? Like I'm pretty sure I've heard of some, and there are a few. The problem is they all tend to incorporate their own intermediate blockchain to try and extract value by way of like trading fees. And in order to fund development more for their project, they do have to find some way to maintain some profitability. Unfortunately, we don't really feel that's the best way to do things. So the DEX won't have trading fees. There will be a upfront fee just to sort of disincentivize malicious, spammy type behavior. But after that, it's really, you're just going to be paying the transaction fees, whatever that are, for the blockchain to make an on-chain transaction. So, and also another big problem is I've only had experience with a couple, but the current decentralized projects or decentralized exchange projects tend to have a pretty terrible user experience, and the liquidity is super low, that may be a problem we faced at the beginning, but since we're going to bring the greatest user experience, if you've seen Decrediton, just imagine that, incorporated with this decentralized exchange platform. So why should you, as a Decred stakeholder, bother thinking about supporting this proposal? We're going to bring the best experience for this. You're going to want to start trading again. And we're also going to hopefully disintermediate centralized exchanges. That's not really like a goal, like an end goal, but we hope to get there at least part of the way. Maybe we can move many people off of the centralized exchanges and hopefully help the cryptocurrency space in that regard. We feel that since our project is very rooted in the value of open source software, that we'll be able to attract a lot of talented developers who will be interested in helping out with this project, as it's going to be very far-reaching in the projects that it benefits. So there will be that, and the publicity that it should bring to the project when they're finally aware of this platform, and hopefully as it matures and develops and accumulates more users. Many people are going to find that a lot of the values of this project this one initiative pervade the rest of our project. So I also want to say that funding for this proposal will come from the community fund, but at a certain point, I don't think that it will require much funding as it matures. It's going to be open source software, so anyone will be able to contribute, and at a certain point, there may not be any need for the community fund to spend any more money on it at all. So it's just something we can help get off the ground that the community as a whole can sort of pick up and run with at a certain point. So if you're interested in this particular proposal, or if you take a look at proposals.decred.org and see anything that you're interested in or would like to get involved with the Decred team and helping out with events, it's something you can do. I want to impress, I'm definitely not a genius or anything. I happened to come across this project and it really grabbed me, and I got really interested in it, and I just started trying to find ways I could help out, and I got involved, and you could do this too. Each and every one of you could definitely do this. So if you are interested, you should definitely reach out and start talking with us, and maybe we can, if you find an area you think you can contribute, it's really just about showing up and putting in the work. So if you want to come see us, I'd love to say hey. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, I'd like to open the floor for questions. Okay. Thank you.
What's going to be the time frame of trading? So for example, if you do want to have an algo that you're running throughout the day, like how often will you be able to execute orders?
I'm actually not sure about that. I don't think that's been laid out quite yet, exactly how often. There will be limitations based on how the various projects work. Like for Decred, there's a 5-minute time window between blocks.
So it's basically like going with the Decred blocks.
Right, and it will, since we'll be facilitating transactions on chain between two different projects, it's going to be limited by how those two blockchains work. So it might be that it's 5 minutes on Decred, but whatever you're trading with, like Bitcoin, I believe is 10 minutes. You might have to wait 10 minutes until that transaction is confirmed, and the appropriate number of confirmed blocks after that have passed in order for the transaction to be considered complete. So
yeah, I know that a lot of people there's various proposals even like in the equity markets and stuff like that to limit the influence of high frequency trading. But if you can only trade once every 5 minutes, it does seem like there would be opportunities for arbitrage. Like if you have an account going on Binance and you got something going on the Decred DEX, and you can lock in a certain rate on the Decred DEX, whereas you can just keep trading for the next 5 minutes on Binance. Like you could probably do something there.
Right. I'm actually not super familiar with how they intend to fight high frequency trading, but Jake did list in his blog post. He went into more detail about it, and there's been more discussion since in Matrix and on Slack in our DEX channel. There's lots of discussion around this. If that's something you're interested in, definitely check out that blog post first. And if that doesn't answer any of your questions, you could reach out to Jake, and he'd probably love to talk to you about this stuff. He's very passionate about trying to fight high frequency trading. So.
I would be curious to know the differences also, because I know that Binance has a DEX coming too, and I'm sure they're going to have a very strong product. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we'll have some competition, but we'll see.
Do you have plans to include fiat on the DEX?
No, unfortunately, well, this will only trade between cryptocurrencies. There won't be any fiat transactions on the decentralized exchange.
Okay.
So maybe I missed it, but what's the status? Is this something that at this point is just a proposal and you're soliciting for developer interest, or is it something that's definitely going to happen?
Well, yes, I want people to start thinking about this and getting excited about it, but it's just a planned proposal. So it's not even a live proposal on our Politeia system yet, but Jake's listed out the properties he's planning to put into the proposal. So we should expect at some point in the future, like a very detailed proposal laid out with more what you can expect in terms of how much this is going to cost and milestones over time and all that. But right now, his blog post just details the properties you can expect from this decentralized exchange and his motivations behind it. And it's an incredibly interesting read. I definitely implore you guys to check that out.
Good morning, young man.
Good morning.
Is this on?
Yes.
It's on. You need to put it towards your mouth a little more.
A little more?
There you go.
I can talk really loud. You mentioned KYC.
Yes.
Are you saying that atomic swaps don't require KYC at all? Please say yes.
Yes. Well,
Thank you.
if you're doing an atomic swap, there's definitely no requirement for anyone to record anything about your transaction. As a matter of fact, we feel like KYC is an invasion of privacy. If you want to do an
True.
atomic swap with a friend or something, there's no need for you to tell the world about it. It should be something that you can do. Same as if you hand your friend Bill a $5 bill, like you shouldn't have to tell everyone about it. We want to be able to bring that to magic internet money. So.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions? Up there.
So you said there's not going to be any trading fees?
No
So-
trading fees.
What incentive is there for people who aren't trading to support the network?
That's an interesting question. I believe that the incentive is going to come from. It's laid out in the blog post, but I believe it's because people want to have this ability to facilitate trades without going through a big centralized exchange. And people who are really passionate about open source software will see that it's definitely, it's hard to say. It's a very interesting question. I might have to do a little bit more follow-up on that. But I believe it's just because people will want to make this server just to make this platform possible and to really help support the network. Similar to how anyone who runs a cryptocurrency node, they do it to boost the network and make sure that their platform's able to continue running and doesn't just go down with too few nodes.
So the merit of just having a decentralized exchange itself is the incentive.
Exactly, and this isn't just for Decred. So all sorts of projects that are going to have users that facilitate trades, between one project to theirs, are going to want this to be running so that the liquidity is there for their project. I feel that people are just going to really want to help support this platform just because of the utility it brings to everyone who transacts with cryptocurrencies.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Anyone else?
How many other coins right now have the atomic swap capability, and are they interested in putting that in?
I'm actually not sure what the exact number is, but it's definitely, there's definitely many projects who have built the functionality already. So assuming we get all the other work out of the way for this to launch, there's already a pretty significant amount of cryptocurrencies that already support atomic swaps. So, do you know,
It's
Marco?
over 16. It's over 16.
Over 16, okay. Yeah. And I think it'll definitely pick up, and more projects will be interested in actually developing that support once something like this is live that really brings the functionality to the masses. So.
And would you consider competitors to be, I want to say that Cosmos is a blockchain which is like in the works, and there's another one that essentially allows for interaction between different blockchains and that sort of thing. Would they be essentially a competitor in this space?
I'm not really familiar with those projects, but it sounds like they might be. But really, competitors to us would just mean like those are other projects that are offering something similar, and it's just incentive to us to try to iterate and offer something even better. So, he has a question over there.
So if there's no fees, why should the Decred Treasury squander its resources to compensate developers to build a system that doesn't generate revenue?
Very good question, but it really comes down to exposure for the project to talented developers. The publicity will receive from having launched this for the cryptocurrency space. I think many will take note of like how like this is like a pretty great gesture of like goodwill to the entire space. We're not trying to capture and extract value from people just trying to facilitate a trade from one blockchain project to the next. And we're really just trying to address the issue with everyone who participates with cryptocurrencies, is pretty passionate about the values and decentralization, but they're having to buy all their projects through a centralized exchange.
Well, I mean, what resources is it going to require to process one of these transactions? I mean, is it going to be it's going to be recorded in the blockchain, so it's going to have to be confirmed, and but I mean, a lot of chains, their block reward will go up marginally depending on how many transactions are running on that network at any given time. So,
well, with this decentralized exchange, like I said a little earlier, the limitation is going to come down to the type of trade you're trying to do due to the respective blockchain, like their window between confirmations. How they mine and confirm blocks is really up to that particular chain. So it's not going to be something that Decred will be trying to extract any sort of value from. It's really, I hope that answered your question, but maybe you might need to elaborate on that.
The point is just nothing's free. I mean, I'd rather it be cheap or less expensive than free and add value to the network rather than just assuming that the additional exposure could possibly cause more demand for the currency.
Hang on.
So I think one of the confusions here is it's not free, it's just there's no incremental expense on top of the network fees, right? So a swap here, you're still paying the network fees. You're still increasing the utility of Decred. It's just there's not an incremental fee for exchange. So it's just increasing the utility of Decred, the network, but it's not taking an extra cut.
Right. Thanks, Chris.
There's no added cost to the exchange, but there's still the cost of using the network.
It's taking out the middleman, guys.
Yeah.
As an example, I've been around Decred for a couple years. Met Marco, I think, about 2 years ago, and Clara maybe a year ago. And I didn't really understand much, but the more exposure I get to Decred, I'm an investor. So the more exposure I get, the more interest I have in this particular project. So the exposure, I think, is well worth what little it's going to cost.
Hang on.
I've been sitting in the back. I'm just letting Scott do his thing. Thank you, Scott. So I do want to bring up one thing. So there is a difference between developers and business guys like you. We don't look at the world the way you do. We don't look at it from a purely value extraction perspective. Well, part of this, why we're doing this DEX, is because we can. Right? We are just going to do this to blow up the exchanges as they exist today because we don't like the way it works. And sure, it's going to cost some money. Sure, it's going to cost some time. But it's going to be hilarious, right? And let's see what happens next. That is the open source ethos, right? So I have an itch. I'm going to go scratch it. And we're going to do this with this DEX. That's 90% of it is literally because we can. So fiat cannot work, right? Because this requires code. So the day we get an encodable dollar, right? So if we could actually have dollars that have, an encoding on it that we can program, then we can definitely make that work, right? So this is purely from a reality perspective. We cannot, encode that dollar. Therefore, we can do the fiat fee, portion. Stablecoins will easily work. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Will stable coins be able to work with the atomic swaps?
Absolutely, they will. Because so the way it works actually with the atomic swaps, as long as it can be encoded, as long as it runs a form of Bitcoin script, which virtually all cryptocurrencies do, you can make this happen. So it's literally about showing up with the code, adding it to the repository, and then each currency that is being added means that now you can trade with all the existing ones at this point, right? So you can go between, so the very first one that we did was Litecoin to Decred. So then the Bitcoin guys showed up, then the Bitcoin Cash guys showed up, then we did Ethereum, so we added all these additional projects to it. But it does mean that now Litecoin can exchange with Bitcoin, right? So, and if you show up, you get all these pairs essentially for free.
Final thoughts?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to say is, as far as fiat, I know you guys have probably heard about USDC recently from Coinbase. So basically, if you can exchange your fiat for USDC, and there's an atomic swap available for USDC to Decred or whichever other project you want to buy, then it will be supported on the exchange. You just won't be able to, you won't be able to use fiat directly to whichever cryptocurrency you're trying to trade for. So, any other questions?
I think one last thought, not to participate too much from the audience, but if you look at how Bitcoin became the unit of account of crypto, and really the reserve asset, it's because when Bitcoin came out in 2009, it was the only asset, and every incremental crypto asset is priced in BTC. And so that makes BTC very liquid, very saleable. Right. But if Decred is able to successfully build out this atomic swap DEX ecosystem, then Decred could potentially sit at the center of swapping for every other asset and therefore being priced in a way for every other asset. So it's a back door into being another unit of account, broadly used unit of account of crypto, which also leads into becoming one of the reserve assets of crypto.
Right.
Hopefully.
It's a great point, man. So I want to say thank you guys, to all of you for listening to my my presentation and the whole spiel. It's really interesting. It's something I feel like people should be passionate about, and as I think more and more people learn of this project, this initiative, and to follow along with the progress on our proposal system, Politeia, this is going to be great. It's going to be amazing. So thank you guys all so much for your time.
Let's give Scott another round of applause.